Hey guys! In this lecture, we're going to make our app more robust to user input by adding validating features to the input text fields in the sign in and sign up views. Let's run the app to see what our app can do as of now to motivate what we're going to do next. We're going to test the sign up view because we're almost done with it. Alright, here's the app. So far, the app is working fine if user input is complete and in a good form. However, even if users don't put in anything at all, the app still tries to proceed. For example, let's tap the Sign Up button. We can see in the console that Firebase is complaining. The sign up process failed, and it's frustrating for users not to know this beforehand. Although Firebase is powerful enough to perform lots of error checking for us, we can improve user experience by not letting them touch that Sign Up button, without at least putting in some information. For Firebase email, password authentication, both are required by Firebase. So even if we input a valid new email, say the email is user5@gmail.com, and then hit the sign up button, the sign up process still fails. On the Firebase website, there's actually a comprehensive list of error codes, and we can read off the code to let users know what they did wrong. Again, we can live okay without doing what we're going to do in this lecture, because Firebase can do lots of error checking. However, for better user experience, let's at least require that the username, email, and password text fields should not be empty, or things like that. So, we're going to add validating ability to these text fields, although we're going to take care of empty text fields only. You can apply the same logic to handle other types of input validation, depending on your apps. Alright, we want to perform this validating step right after the view launched. So let's call this method, if we have one, in the viewDidLoad method. Let's say it's the handleTextField method. It's going to be a method of the signup view controller. So let's see how we should implement it. To check blank text fields, our idea is to observe if there's any change in them. If all of them don't have at least some input, we'll disable the sign up button. To do so, let's equip our text fields with something that can detect if they're edited. So for the username text field, this add target method is exactly what we want. Basically, this text field can now detect a certain event. If such event is detected, an action will be performed by the target. We let self be the target so that the signup view controller will perform this action. Now, for the event, let's say we want to detect if this text field is edited. So, if we detect that, we want the signup view controller to do something defined by this action. Okay? So, we'll define a method of the signup view controller before performing this action. Let's give it a name, like text field did change. Alright, good. Let's see how we should implement this method. In this method, we're going to check if all of the text fields have something in them. If yes, then we highlight the sign up button. Otherwise, we just disable it. Actually, my bad. Let's copy over its name to make sure things are correct. Okay. Alright. Good. As usual, before diving into doing anything fancy, let's print something out first to make sure things hook up nicely. So in this method, let's print whatever users put in the username text field. Then, run the app. Okay. Right. Okay. Alright, let's see. Let's type something in this username text field. Alright, great. This method actually gets called for every change that happens in the text field. This is great. Alright, so let's do this for every text field. We simply check blank status for all of them, so the logic is the same. So let's copy over this command. We're going to add this observer to the email text field and the password text field too. This should be email text field. Okay. And this is password text field. Okay, good. Now let's delete this print command to implement it for real. For more compact and intuitive code, we're going to do it with the guard statement. We can still use the if statement because they're basically the same. Here, we first unwrap the content of the username text field and assigned it to a constant named username. Given that content, we check if it has any value or not. This can be easily done by asking if it is not the case that this extracted string from the username text field is empty. Okay. All right. Okay. So this is quite intuitive. This Boolean property says true if the string has no character in it. And the exclamation mark indicates the inverse. That means the whole thing is true if the username string is not empty. Similarly, we do that for the other text fields. Define a constant named email to hold the string content of the email text field. Then check if it is not empty as we did for the username text field. Finally, we do the same thing for the password text field. All right. Okay. Define a constant named password. We use it to hold the string content of the password text field. Okay. Then check if users typed in anything. My bad. There's a typo. Okay. By checking if the content of the password text field is not empty. All right. If the whole thing here turns out to be wrong, meaning that at least one of the text fields is empty, then we'll kind of disable the sign up button in this else branch. If things turn out to be okay, we'll signal users by, say, highlighting the sign up button or things like that. Actually, I don't think we have any variable we can use to customize the sign up button. So let's create an IB outlet for that purpose. Let's option click the Start Storyboard to open it in the Assistant Editor. Then control drag it to the Signup View controller to create an IB outlet. And name Signup Button. Any meaningful name works. Okay, now let's use this property to customize the Signup button when we're happy with the user input. As a demonstration, we're going to highlight its title by changing its title color to a bright white color. Okay. For UI control state, let's say we use normal for the default state of the button. And then we're going to let's see what we should do if the input is invalid. We need to do that in the else branch. As opposed to the valid case, let's first simply darken the title of the sign up button. We can use the same command as below, just using a darker color. A quick way is to use a predefined UI color, but you can easily customize one yourself. The control state is just normal. Then return to breakout from this method. The normal state here kind of means whatever we specify in the first parameter. In this case, is the light text UI color will be applied to this button, without having to select, touch the button, or something like that. All right, let's test this cool feature. Keep an eye on the sign up button. Now let's fill them up, like one, and notice the color of this title. It'll become a bright white color when the input is valid, meaning this condition is met. Now if one of the three conditions is not met, the title will then have a light color. However, the button is still active for invalid input. For a better user experience, we can disable the button when the input is invalid by setting its isEnabled property to false. Now, if the input is valid, we can then enable this button by setting its isEnabled property to true. All right, let's see. Okay. All right, let's test our cool feature. All right, first let's choose a profile photo. So far, it's not required in our app. All right, let's choose a good username. we're going to use our team name and our email, which is 0tolaunch.io.gmail.com, which you can see that so far the button is disabled, which is great. It's enabled and highlighted after we fill out everything, and is disabled again if the input is invalid. Great. Let's choose a good password, then create our user. As usual, let's look at our database to see real-time action. All right. Fantastic. This is our new user with email and stuff. We can query this user in real time thanks to Firebase database. You can also see our new user in this list of registered users in the Authentication tab. All right, that's a basic validation feature. This provides a great start for you if you want any other fancy validation features. Now, before ending this lecture, let's try a first taste of writing clean code. Usually it's a good idea that the code for a small or basic task should be encapsulated in a sort of unit function. Right now, in our signup button method, we create a new user, store profile photo in the storage, then link up everything in the database, all with detailed implementation. This is probably too much for a single method, and it makes the code really hard to read. So let's factor our code a little bit to make it cleaner and more readable. So for each small task in the signup button method, we will implement it separately. For example, we can implement a method called setUserInformation to push user data to the database. Its parameter includes profile image URL, which is of type string. It's kind of this profile image URL. Similarly, the second parameter is username, which is also a string. And the next parameter is an email string. The last one is, actually, we have the profile image URL already. Okay, this method pushed data to the database for a specific user. So we also need a user ID parameter. It's also of type string. We know that. With that method properly implemented, we can then call it here, instead of writing everything out as of now. This stuff is actually what we want to encapsulate using our new method. So let's move it into the body of our new method. We actually need to correct a few things to make it work. That's why there's some errors now. But let's say we have that setUserInformation method implemented. We can then call it here. Note that we're operating in a closure, so we need the self keyword to call this instance method. Actually, this profile image URL shouldn't be here. We don't have this metadata thing in this method. This is the metadata returned from Firebase after we store the profile photo there. So let's move this command outside of the body of this method. Okay, now let's input it into the method call. All right, now the user ID. We're going to use Firebase user ID for the relative path of the new user. So let's use the UID constant for the UID input of the new method. Now the username input. It's simply the content of the username text field. So let's use that for the username input of the new function. It's similar for the email input. Okay. All right, good. Now let's correct a few things in the implementation. First of all, for the UID, it's just a string, not an optional string. It's because of how we declare the method. Instead, we're going to move the unwrap thing to outside the function implementation, as the UID in the function call is an optional string. Next, for the username, we use the text content of the username text field in the function call. So in the function body, we use the username parameter instead. That's similar for the email parameter. Okay, finally, the profile image URL parameter is kind of similar to the UID parameter. So we unwrap the input before calling the function. Basically, this parameter is not an optional, so there's no unwrap stuff in the function body. Okay, we're good. Our code is now much more intuitive and readable. In the sign up button action now, whenever we need to push user information to the database, simply call the new method without needing to know all the hairy detailed implementation. All right, let's pick a photo for the profile picture. Okay, great. Now let's fill out the sign up form. Let's say this is user5 with email user5@gmail.com, and the password is 123456. Did you notice the sign up button kind of changed its status? All right, let's check out the database. All right, let's give it some time. We're just trying to see if the code is still working fine after the factoring step. All right, fantastic. We'll work on the login view next time. See you then.